Welcome back to the Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Win Liu. For segment 2, I'm joined by co-host Blake Murphy, who we were chatting about the greatness and the longevity of Rick Carlisle. And we will be joined on the line as well for segment 2 by Michael Scotto of the True Hoop podcast. Mike, you there?
Hey, what's up, fellas? How are you guys?
We are doing good. We are doing good. Blake, I think you have some Shohei banter?
Yeah, first, it's a HoopsHype podcast. We got to send people to the right spot for Michael Scotto's work. Franz Wagner on the you said True Hoop.
Did I say True? My bad.
Franz
My bad.
Wagner on the pod this week. Michael, I got to ask, I know you're a Yankee fan, so before we do the basketball stuff, some buzz about Shohei potentially coming to the American League East, but it's to the Toronto Blue Jays. How would that make a Yankees fan feel?
I mean, I don't think we were ever really expecting him. We would have loved to have a guy like him, but I think for us more Juan Soto is our guy, and maybe if we can get one other pitcher, that'd be nice. But to me, Soto would be great for them. He's in his prime. He's in his mid-20s, and I would love that. But we've got some work to do. I feel like we wasted a Gerrit Cole Cy Young season, and Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman, they've got something to prove this offseason. So hopefully they can do that, because right now they're in the crosshairs a little bit for some Yankee fans here in the States.
So some Yankee fans starting to lose their patience a little bit. Similar vibe around the Toronto Raptors, where maybe not as, it's certainly not as, there's not the level of Yankees exceptionalism where the expectation is World Series or bust every year.
Yeah.
But certainly some impatience setting in with the Raptors. Decision not to make a decision in terms of their path and their timeline. Michael, you had a great piece up at HoopsHype on November 29th that kind of did a roundup of who's the player to watch for each team. And you get to the Raptors segment, and it's like, well, the quote an exec used to you was the wild card team. And I feel like that's what they were last year. Yeah. That's what they were before. We can get into some of the player specifics, but the Raptors in general, are we headed for another February where they're a swing piece and there are a lot of teams around the league waiting to see what they're going to do?
Yeah, Blake, I think the difference last year to this year is that Toronto has to make decisions. You've got Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, two coveted guys around the league that are due for some pretty big pay raises. And also you can include Gary Trent as a guy that they have to make a decision on as well. I would say for them, they're definitely a wild card team in the sense that they're hovering around 500 at this point. And for Toronto, they've got a young asset in Scotty Barnes that they want to build around. They didn't want to include him in the Kevin Durant trade talks back when he was available. And they feel that he's going to be a core piece. Now, some executives around the league may debate whether he's, a number one guy on a championship contender team. I don't think most people around the league believe that, but he's certainly a valued core piece and a guy that's played well this year. So for Toronto, OG Anunoby fits more that timeline given his age, but he is going to have a lot of suitors, and him being unrestricted complicates things. An extension for him doesn't make sense based on the number he's at now because it's too low given where the market projects him to be. That's just business. That doesn't mean that he wouldn't necessarily return, just logical business. And then for Pascal Siakam, he's been in trade talks for a while now, and this is a guy that is an all-NBA caliber player when he's at his peak. So he's a little bit older, and, given that they lost Fred VanVleet in free agency for nothing, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with Siakam. Previously, Toronto has lost some marquee players. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry, and most recently Fred VanVleet. The biggest thing with OG Anunoby is, will a team that has max cap space entering free agency in the summer of 2024 target him? Some executives wondered maybe he gets a short-term max deal, somewhat similar to Fred VanVleet. I think for Toronto, that's going to certainly be something that they're monitoring. And, he's got a lot of trade value. Last year, this was a guy that I believe, according to reports, they passed on 3 first-round picks for him. And, it wouldn't shock me. The Brooklyn Nets passed on 4 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, as I had reported on HoopsHype. So OG Anunoby potentially worth 3 last year wouldn't have shocked me. I think this year now, with him going into unrestricted free agency, that value would drop a little bit. unless a team firmly believes that it can sign him long term. And one of the teams that I had mentioned in the piece that you referenced, Blake, was the Philadelphia 76ers, because they can create max cap space and go after him. However, this is just my opinion. If I was Philadelphia, I would be trying to trade for OG Anunoby so that way you can acquire his bird rights, and then also you have a better chance of keeping Tobias Harris as well and really fortifying one of the top starting fives in the league if you were able to pull that off. But time will tell on that. There's a ways to go. But again, those guys, and along with Gary Trent, who was reportedly in the mix for an extension with Toronto, but that hasn't happened. And at this point, Gary's a streaky shooter, guy that, when he's hot, when he's cold, it's like the Arctic. So
we know.
That's yeah. So I mean, Toronto's got a lot of potential moving parts. I just think the difference this year, Blake, is they have to make a decision compared to last year where they could have kicked the can down the road. You can't do that now.
Yeah. Okay. Lots of great details there. And I would love to follow up on a lot of that. On the Pascal Siakam front, I know there was links to Atlanta, and you have reported here that the Hawks, quote, continue to monitor him as a trade target. The Hawks are also kind of at 500. They could also, if they want to push in that direction, it would still make sense for them. What are you hearing on that front?
Well, for the Hawks, they had just gotten a new deal done with DeJounte Murray. Obviously, they have Trae Young there. They're looking to win now. I think one of the things that's been interesting since over the summer to now and the start of the season, Jalen Johnson has played really well for them, and he's a guy that's in the most improved player of the year conversation. So for Atlanta, I think they have to make a decision. Is Jalen a guy that they can really continue to build around? Is he a core piece? Or is he a guy that, other teams would want in trade talks? I mean, he's a talented young player. So do they move him? It's a question they have to figure out. For a guy like Pascal Siakam, I mean, Masai Ujiri always drives a hard bargain. He's going to want the best assets on any team, even with him going into free agency in the summer as well. And on HoopsHype, he's currently our number 2 overall free agent going into the market. So, I think for Atlanta, they're certainly going to monitor his situation. They're not only going to monitor him, they're looking to upgrade and get better. So I do look for them to be active and to try to be a buyer if they can at the trade deadline this year to improve their team going forward, especially after the new deal for DeJounte Murray.
Yeah. Well, the Pascal thing is interesting too because he is going into free agency, as you mentioned, and any team that would acquire him would want to know if he's going to re-sign in that market or if he has a strong interest in re-signing in that market, because that's the difference between a team paying a rental price versus paying an acquisition price. And I do think that that's a pretty key detail. And yeah, I don't know if Pascal will want to re-sign in Atlanta.
I mean, bird rights still go a long way, though. You can get the extra year at the end. You can get a little bit more money. The question, honestly, becomes, is that team, as much as is Pascal willing to sign the extension after this or sign a new deal after the season, is whoever acquires him willing to pay him the max, or is that going to be a negotiation in free agency? So I could see that kind of going both ways.
Yeah, that's fair.
If you're a playoff caliber team and you're not going to have cap space, it absolutely, Blake, to your point, would be advantageous for that team to acquire his bird rights, and then you can go over the cap and keep a player his caliber.
Yeah. So, Michael, when it comes to the Raptors, one of the things that dictates this decision and where they're going is the level of play of Scotty Barnes. He's taken a big leap this year, rookie of the year, a bit of a plateau last year, at least statistically. This year, much improved offensively, significantly better defensively. When you talk to people around the league, because this could kind of go two ways. You could think, well, Scotty Barnes is good enough to help you win right now. Maybe the Raptors ride this out. I personally, we're a couple years into this. We know what it looks like. The other thinking would be, well, Scotty Barnes could potentially be such a good piece. Everything the Raptors do should be about making sure the right group of players is around him when he's ready to kind of hit that peak. What is your sense from people around the league in terms of whether this Scotty Barnes jump is, all the way legitimate, and how that might inform what the Raptors are thinking here?
Well, when you talk to execs around the league, look, the jump that Scotty Barnes has made has been notable and taken into account by people around the league. For some, eh, they've been linked certainly Toronto to like Zach LaVine, for example. But I don't know if Zach LaVine is going to push them forward where they want to be ultimately. I think he's a good player and he would be an upgrade. But, I've gotten some inclination that Toronto would like to, if they could, get a star type of player. Now, I don't know if Zach is that guy. I think Zach is a really good player and at times is an all-star caliber player. But given the money and the new CBA agreement, looking ahead towards luxury tax and restrictions along those lines, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze there. So in terms of Scotty Barnes and how he affects things, Toronto certainly is pleased with his progress. Again, this is a guy that they didn't want to include in Kevin Durant trade talks for this reason. They thought that he can be a major core piece going forward. When I have spoken with executives, rival executives wouldn't necessarily build around him as the number one guy on a championship caliber team, but he's certainly a piece that you can have on a team. So again, I think this ties into OG Anunoby because he's younger and more along the trajectory of Scotty in terms of age and the window that Toronto would have to compete. I think for Pascal, if you're going to keep Pascal as he's, going into the 30s range, you're going to want to go, assuming you sign him to a long-term deal, you're going to want to compete and try to win now and maximize the remainder of the prime of his career. So those are all variables they're weighing right now. And again, I think some people wondered when they re-signed Jakob Poeltl if that meant that they were looking to try to get better and acquire another star type of guy. Ultimately, I think he keeps things the same. He's a really good center and he's still young, so he's still got time if they wanted to extend their window a few more years. Really, to me, as much as you ask me about Scotty Barnes, I think they have to decide if Pascal Siakam is the guy that they want to kind of really be the focal point of this team for the next few years, or if they recalibrate that and go younger around Scotty Barnes and OG Anunoby and Jakob Poeltl, et cetera, to extend maybe a window for a few more years, given that they're all younger.
That does seem, the latter does seem a lot more likely. Can I just circle back quickly on Gary? What was the situation there? Because there was a report in the summer from Chris Haynes that he had opted in, but that the Raptors were looking to make an extension happen. Mm-hmm. What would that extension have looked like, and ultimately, why did it fall through?
Well, I mean, I will say this. I can only speak to, who I talked to.
For sure.
There were definitely conversations about an extension with Gary Trent Jr. And I had heard it would be somewhere around possibly $20 million now per year, annual per year. Now, I don't know if Gary wanted more or if Toronto kind of pulled back on that. I don't know. Mm-hmm. What I can tell you is that if something were to get done looking ahead, my educated reasoning would say to me that if something got done, it would be a short-term extension at this point.
Yeah.
And not something long-term. But I think right now, Gary's a guy that they've kind of been trying to figure out if he's going to be a core piece or not. And certainly, I think, fellas, you have to look at the selection of Grady Dick in the draft as a hedge that he could be a replacement for Gary down the line, and a less expensive one at that. Both can provide shooting, ideally when they're right. So, as far as Gary now, it almost makes you say, well, if the extension didn't get done then, given the way the season's gone, why would it now?
Yeah.
So, of the three, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, and Gary Trent, I think you could certainly make the case that Toronto would prioritize the other two guys ahead of Gary long term. And, TBD on Gary's future in Toronto.
So Gary Trent would not be, the most notable named move at the deadline unless it's quite a quiet deadline. This doesn't have to be Raptor specific. We're just zooming out to the NBA now. Michael, it's a little early. We're still 10 days out from a bunch of the league being even trade eligible. So forgive me for, a little early here asking you this. Who do you think is the biggest name that could be moved between now and the trade deadline?
Nah, that's okay, Blake. You're doing your job. I mean, we all do it every day. These are the conversations that we have, brother. I think first off, the GLeague Showcase I look at as much as anything as a marker because that's where a lot of executives are going to be, and there's going to be. It's almost like the winter meetings. There's the winter meetings of baseball. Well, it's similar that to the NBA. You're starting to go back and forth on concepts and ideas. With that in mind, given everything and all the intel that's at my disposal and around the league right now, I think the two biggest names that could get moved lie in Chicago, and it would be Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan, possibly both, depending on what direction Chicago goes. To me, when you look at where they are in the standings, and given that big three trio has not won without Lonzo Ball when he was healthy, they've got to make a change. And certainly Zach LaVine has been frustrated. DeMar DeRozan has clearly been frustrated. He's publicly alluded to it. Whereas Zach LaVine, it's been more about, reporting that hasn't been denied. Make of that what you will. But I think in Chicago, they have two of the top names right now that could be moved. And I think that if you're looking for a quote unquote, I don't know if I'd call them a seller, but certainly a team that's going to make a move, you have to look at the Chicago Bulls right now. No question.
Yeah, that it would be. It would make a lot of sense given where they are and how the path forward or the path to bottoming out doesn't seem particularly strong either way. Without making a couple of moves here, Michael, that's on the potential seller side. Are there any teams that you think might catch the general public off guard by being a buyer, maybe ahead of what we would have thought the schedule was before last summer?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of executives have wondered if, Orlando, because of their hot start, or Oklahoma City would make a move. I wouldn't bank on Orlando right now, given their young core. They like their core. They want to see where it's going. I think they are realistic about their expectations. Certainly, they're pleasantly surprised with where they are right now. But the team that everyone is always monitoring, and I think around the league is feared, is the Oklahoma City Thunder, because they have significantly more assets to trade, whether it's young players, future draft capital, to make a move. And we've seen Sam Presti go after a guy like Paul George previously. So I think that's the dark horse buyer in the NBA right now, and a team that has the assets to get it done, whether it's young players or future draft capital.
Yeah. That would be scary if OKC made that kind of move. Hey, last thing I wanted to ask. So you had Franz Wagner on your podcast. What was the biggest takeaway for you in that conversation? Obviously, that was on your podcast.
I did. Franz was a pleasure to talk with. I think the biggest thing that stand out I'd say three things stuck out to me briefly from that pod. One, he admitted that they have the belief now when they go into the arena that they're going to win each game. They didn't have that in the past. Wow. So this team believes in itself and believes they're for real. Number two, he specifically pointed out Coach Jamal Mosley as a guy that's been the driver of the culture change there. And certainly as coach of the month, I, for one, think he's certainly a coach of the year candidate, given the start of the season that they've had. Nobody expected them to be this good, this quickly. And, they had lost Wendell Carter and Markelle Fultz. These are two guys that were starting for them. The third thing that stuck out to me was going back to the summer when he played for Germany and they won the FIBA World Cup. For Franz, he basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially he said that was something that when he was young, he couldn't even have dreamt about as a young German, because it was so crazy of a thought given how little German basketball was impacted at that time. Sure, you had Dirk Nowitzki, but that was one guy. Now, his belief is that them winning the FIBA World Cup is going to affect future generations, and it really put them on the map. And I would certainly agree with that. I don't think a lot of people coming into the tournament, pegged them as the winners. They certainly were a formidable bunch with several NBA guys, including Dennis Schroeder, Daniel Tyson, his brother Mo Wagner. But those were the three main takeaways I had from Franz. And he's certainly a player that a lot of executives around the league think is going to be a really good player going forward. And for Orlando, he's a good core piece to build around.
That sounds like a great conversation. You can check that out on the Hoops Hype podcast. Michael Scotto, appreciate you.
You got it, fellas. Anytime. Thanks for having me.